Namaste. Our human mind stands in an interregnum of reality, and therefore it has a tendency to cut everything into two clear cut pieces: life and death, time and the eternal, ignorance and knowledge, and so on and so forth. But there is another way, and this is a practical distinction necessary for the mind to navigate and operate. But there is another way to look at this as a phenomenon in continuum, as one single continuum where we move from a state of ignorance to a state of knowledge. So, first the basic fundamental understanding, then we see how this came into being. So, what really is knowledge? In very simple terms, knowledge is the end of all our seeking and search for truth, for reality, for the origin, for the source. Implicit within it is a very logical presumption, if I may say so. To those who have the experience, it's no more a presumption. But the premise is that there is one single source and origin of everything. All this multiple varied universe, cosmos, and who knows, multiverses. So that origin, that source, is the end of all our seeking. We may also say end of all our knowledge and knowings. When we have passed beyond knowings, then we shall have knowledge, as Sri Aurobindo says. This end of knowledge, as we know, is the word called Vedanta. What is the end of knowledge? The end of knowledge is to discover that one reality, that one source of all things, that one origin. As I said, it's consistent with elementary logic that there cannot be multiple sources of everything in the universe. And yet, that's how we live in. Each of us has a kind of hashtag attached to our personal file of personal life. And in that hashtag, we are our father's name, our mother's name, our ancestors, our religion, country, and so on and so forth. And therefore, each one has a different hashtag attached. So, this state where we look at each other, ourselves, as something divided from our origin, is a state of ignorance. Meaning, thereby, we do not know our ignorance, our origin, and we are seeing the immediate and the intermediate aspects or the phenomenal existence as real, and therefore we do not know that origin, that source which is at the core of everything. So it's called as ignorance, and naturally it's a frightful thing. It's almost like moving in this world as an orphan. Whereas, who is a parent? He is the king of kings, to put it that way. Moving as a pauper when our parents are the Raj Rajeshwar. So, this is a way of looking at it. Therefore, to live in ignorance is to live in misery for no reason at all. So, now let's try to understand it the other way around. This is from when we look at it from the mental consciousness point of view. But to understand these things, we have to go back as to how ignorance came into being. First, there is only one source. How the ignorance came into being, and it came into being with the impulsion within the one to become many. Why become many? Because one is infinite, and this infinite is a being but a formless being. He wants to build forms, those forms in which he can inhabit himself. And these forms, necessarily, by the very fact that they would be forms, would have a certain configuration in time and space. So, initially, the first forms that emerge out of the one are aspects of the one, infinite aspects. And these are the gods: a god of love, a god of war, a god of peace. And quite naturally, they are different aspects. Within the divine, one divine, they are held as the myriad nodes of a single being, infinite personality. So, there is no problem there. But that is still only he in his infinite personality. So, each of them starts creating his own world, and these are the gods who start building their worlds, each world unique and wonderful in its own right. And yet these forms, they are constantly knowing about the one, they have a tendency to merge back to the one. They are not so stable and concrete. Second, each of them, these forms, the form of the gods, is a partial representation of the totality of the one. So again, it doesn't fulfill the purpose. He wants to become many in the sense that each integer contains within itself the fullness of the original divine consciousness. This is a big challenging task. So the gods, as we find in the higher planes, they are not enough. Higher means before these form and name of this kind come into existence. So they must go still further. The forms must be built in which the consciousness can be lodged with some sense as if it is unique, as if it is independent, as if it is seemingly separated from the one. Now there starts the problem. Because nothing can really be separated from the origin, but a point comes when certain forms are built and the power that emerges from him, from the one to build many such finite forms, is what is called as Maya, measuring out, it measures out. So this Maya has two aspects. One is Vidyamai, where she is creating. This is the original term of the word Maya. She is conscious of the one, and all the forms she starts building are also conscious of the one. But they are leaning towards the many. They are deliberately choosing to confine themselves within a certain form. But these forms where one is conscious of the one are very subtle forms. Otherwise one cannot be. Form by its nature means to limit. But though these beings are within forms, they are conscious of the one. And again there is a problem. So this Maya further concentrates itself and becomes avidyamai, meaning thereby that it starts building more and more dense form in which the consciousness of the one that goes becomes apparently limited. It becomes like a prison, imprisons it. There is obviously a purpose within it, but that we will see later. And as this happens further and further, ultimately the whole creation ends up into a state of dense darkness, state of inconscient. There is a seemingly it starts cutting off from the one reality, at least in terms of consciousness. There is such a dense form ultimately that it is completely cut off. The consciousness within is the same ultimately as the consciousness in its origin. There are no two consciousnesses, there is one consciousness. But it gets a sense as if we are in a room which is completely closed on every side and completely dark. So it feels that this is the end of the world, this is what it is. But since within it still consciousness is one, it seeks to expand itself and grow, and that's how the recovery process starts. But in the process when this happens, the one who wants to become many, now he starts the real game. So what is the real game? The gods, as we know, are specks. Now he creates many seeds or brings out many seeds out of himself, and each seed carries within itself the same perfection which can become like the one divine. The gods don't have this possibility. Gods are very subtle forms, they will merge back. At the same time, each is one aspect. It doesn't carry. The God of love is God of love. The God of war is the God of war. So he creates seeds which have that complete potential of ultimately developing and becoming the same one divine. And there is a round table conference, to put it in a story way. And he asked these seeds, are you ready to go into this dense darkness so that we can become multiple divines? You will grow and eventually you will be like me. And from that extreme, when forms are being built further, now the rescue process begins, return process begins. Now slowly these forms will adapt and adjust to a growing consciousness till we have a form which is made out of solid matter as we understand it, and yet it can contain all the power, the glory, the omniscience, the omnipotence of the one. This is the challenge. Because when the gods are created or the higher world forms are created, that is the problem, that if you put a lot of pressure, then they tend to merge back. In the dense forms, if the omnipotence and omniscience of the divine puts a lot of pressure, then they tend to break up. So this is now the rescue process starts, and all of us in our soul state said yes. And he said, okay, let's go. And thus was taken the plunge of the souls into the night of inconscience. So, are there forms in the inconscient? No, they began to emerge. As soon as the soul went, the dark nature, Diti, it started a play of building forms. Dark forms means in which consciousness was completely trapped and lost. But because there was an urge to arrive at the one, these forms or beings who were inhabiting these forms, they became beings of division because they could not see anything other than themselves. But because the element of the soul is there, it grew through all these experiences. And as it grew from birth to birth to birth, the forms began to change and become more and more plastic to the light. This is the process. So, in the process, we have reached up to the human form, where the human body can respond not only to the human mind, mental forces, but forces which are beyond the human mind, spiritual forces, inspiration, intuition, revelations. So, it can begin to respond. Our brain can begin to respond. Our hearts can begin to respond. So, to that extent, the rescue has taken place. What has this got to do with ignorance and knowledge? Well, it shows us that the process of ignorance to knowledge is not a sudden arbitrary division. There is a rescuing of the knowledge from the caves of darkness. See, that is the story of Angiras and the cow legion. We can look at it like this, that the knowledge which is there, trapped inside this darkness, is being rescued. And as it is rescued, forms are developing which can manifest it. For instance, there is knowledge even in the lowliest of worm. Even the virus knows how to mutate. There is a knowledge. That's all. Atom knows how to, within its structure, create a balance. It doesn't know, but there is a knowledge which is instinct within it, implicit within it. So everywhere we see hints of knowledge. But in human beings, there is a capacity to express this knowledge through walk, through speech. It is something very unique. In animals, there are sounds. And with human beings, there is speech. Now, why this is so unique? Because ultimately, both knowledge and ignorance, they emerge from that first stir of creation. And within human beings, there is this wonderful apparatus which can express that vibratory mode. At least it can try to express that vibration, which is at the origin of all things. So we see that this evolution proceeds and arrives at this stage where it is tending consciously towards discovering the one reality. So there are two ways of looking at ignorance and knowledge. One is the traditional way, that knowledge, vidya, is the knowledge of the one. Avidya is the relative knowledge of the many. So what happens at each stage? How is knowledge rescued? There is a partial knowledge. We begin to discover a little bit. Let's say science discovers certain things. Then as science develops, there are new things that come into discovery. The crude medicine changes into immunological medicine. It changes into, still more molecular medicine, genetic medicine. So this is how it is rescuing. Knowledge is being rescued. So one way to look at it is, no, knowledge of the one is vidya. All this knowledge comes under the circumference of ignorance. It is too summary a way of looking at it. Because if we look at it in a summary way, then the logical conclusion will be the best ways to find the shortest route out of this entire circle of ignorance into vidya. From avidya, find a route by intensity of concentration, because in human beings it's possible. Consciousness reaches that point. Find one hole through intense concentration, break free this shell of ignorance, merge into the one and say, now, Shivoham, Shivoham. So that's one possibility. But the Isha Upanishad very beautifully remarks, and that's what I think in the beginning it was said. It says, if you dwell in avidya, obviously you are living in darkness, because you don't know the origin. If you go into vidya alone, you go into greater darkness. So what is the path it advises? It says progressive widening of ignorance towards knowledge. That is the path which is given to man. So we see these two paths always running parallel in India. One is the path of moksha, Shiva, destroy ignorance and be free. It is destruction of ignorance. Literally, all this system, philosophies, biology, sociology collapses. It is ignorance. Why it is ignorance? Because it doesn't have the ultimate knowledge of the One. Without knowing the One, all this knowledge doesn't find its ultimate justification. There is a very beautiful, one of the sentences of Sri Aurobindo. You cannot understand water without knowing God. It's so true. Because ultimately, we have to know that One. But generally speaking, this moksha dhara says, why take all this painful, long, laborious labor? Let's cut away, done with ignorance, and let's get into knowledge. Let's be done with avidya and get into One. But the problem is when we take such a leap, we leave a gap in our understanding, gap in our evolution. And when there is a gap, we don't understand. It's like imagine somebody who is gone suddenly, picked up from Delhi, and he is put in a closed aircraft. Suddenly he lands up in Mount Everest. Chances are more that he will die. He won't experience the delight. Even if on oxygen he survives, he doesn't understand what has this got to do with that place from where I am coming. But if the same person walks the whole way, slowly, acclimatizing himself, and then when he reaches the peak, he will enjoy the peak and he will understand that this is a whole journey which he has undertaken. So there are these two paths towards vidya or knowledge. One is to break free from the circle of ignorance and arrive at moksha, Lord Shiva's great path. Another is the great path of Krishna. They are one God, but they play in being two. Hari Har. So what is that other path? Other path is don't cut this knot of ignorance abruptly. Go through a progressive widening till the individual arrives first at the cosmic consciousness. Even there one doesn't have that ultimate knowledge of the One, but one starts living in cosmic truth. There one discovered the avidyamai maya and the vidyamai maya. Then because one has enlarged oneself while being within the form, and all these energies are going to impact the form. It's not easy to bear that tremendous impact as the widening takes place. It's not easy. People often say that, Sri Aurobindo at 78, he left his body. I just wonder how he continued to live with that kind of consciousness in the body. How his body could bear the impact. That's why he says toward the end that, towards 1949, that if one of us has to go, I'll go because your body is better prepared. So the form must develop to a point where it must completely embody the supreme divine consciousness. That is the big challenge for which our souls have come. Krishna takes us along that path. So it comes, tells us step by step. At no point he says abandon this world of avidya. Play with avidya while remembering the One. This is what Krishna says. Be in vidya. Man mana bhav mad bhakta madhyajima namaskuru. And then you fight the great battle of life. This same thing as Ishopanishad, kurvanne vihe karmani jijivishe chatang sama. So live in the consciousness of the One, but play with multiplicity. This is Krishna, but he takes us through that journey. Then comes Sri Aurobindo, he says, yes, wonderful. Now, make this world equal and one with that which is beyond. Make it a habitation for the Lord, because this is what is meant to be. So that is the next project. But first, it's important to understand that ignorance is partial knowledge. It is not invalid knowledge. It's a partial knowing. But there is a greater knowledge than this. There is still greater knowledge. All science advances like that. And we can take a simple analogy. Give a book, the Ramayana. I have now a beautiful example comes to my mind. But first this one, that, give a book, the Ramayana, to a child. And the child asks, what is it? If it is an English version, he will say A, B, C, D. Or he will say, recognize A, Ra, Ma. Because he understands letters. Is he wrong? No, he is not wrong. When he grows up a little, what is it? He will read sentences. There are people who ratify Hanuman Chalisa. But what it means is a different thing altogether. Is it wrong? No. It is partial knowledge. Then to a third person, Okay, what is it? Ramayana. He will say, he will start reading it, start understanding little bit. Where did the journey begin? From that Ra or Ta. Ramayana begins with the letter Ta. So that way this knowledge expands till a time comes when somebody, you hand over the Ramayana and you tell him what is it, he will say the book of God. So this is how the march takes place. Now this reminds me of a real story. Somebody went with this book, The Mother, written by Sri Aurobindo, to meet an astrologer for whatever purpose. So he saw that book, this man had some kind of inner vision. And he suddenly tells him, starts doing pranam to this man who had gone to the astrologer. And he says, why are you doing this to me? He said, you are carrying God's book in your hand. So this is a vision which changes as we ascend further and further. I remember once in my, Air Force days that I was sitting in my office, in my room, chamber, and two people came who were very vociferous in trying to convert people to their gurus, like people want to win disciples. Somehow they felt that I have some spiritual interest, and so they wanted to convert me. So I was also playing. I said, see, I have no interest. I found my path. No, sir, if you do this meditation, you will see a voice, hear a voice and see a vision. I said, so what happens after that? That's not my goal. I don't want to hear voices and see visions. If they come, fine. But I want that ultimate truth. He said, sir, you will get it there. I said, see, tell me one thing. Can your guru answer these things? And I had those nutty questions all the time in my head. Law of karma, why he created this and all these things. He said, that is something which only God can answer. So on my table were these two books, Savitri and the Life Divine. I said, he has answered for me. Where, sir? I said, these are the books. If you want to take it, you can take it and find the answers for yourself. But if you don't have the question, then you cannot find the answers. So you see what happens, this progression of ignorance to knowledge, it's a quest. We cannot take a jump from ignorance to knowledge without the quest. This quest is the aspiration, the flame, the fire which is worshipped. And it is this flame which on one side must not mount too high, as Savitri puts it. Why? Because it mounts too high. He starts very beautifully. A jail is this immense material world. But he says if this flame mounts too high suddenly, it will meet an answering touch and the matter itself will collapse. There have been instances like that. There have been yogis who went into trance and they disappeared. And people regard it as a great feat. No, it's not a great feat. The great feat is to remain awake and bear that touch which slays and saves. This is the challenge before us. Not to withdraw into samadhi, in which if you stay in 21 days or 42 days, depending on the tradition, you will vanish. That's not a big deal. To vanish is easy. People often ask, how is it easy? It's easy. You want to destroy anything, it takes moments. But you have to build the form in such a way that the divine consciousness can fully manifest in it. And yet the form will persist. Means the form has to undergo a change. It's not possible beyond a point. So the flame is not allowed. Why it is not allowed? Because if it suddenly goes beyond a certain limit, the answering touch will shatter it. That's what we see in Savitri when Ashwapati stands at the gates of the Divine Mother. What does he say? What thou hast asked is thine, but ask no more. Alone thou standest at the eternal doors. My sweetness and delight are the cause of life, but too immense my danger and my joy. Truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth. Man cannot bear the weight of the infinite. So this is the mystery. Why knowledge and ignorance are two terms that have been created. Ignorance is there for a purpose, and the purpose is that slowly, as the soul grows, it grows point by point. There is nothing like a sudden growth. In very interesting in Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo speaks of this, and it's unfortunate. Many of even people who talk about Sri Aurobindo, suddenly they are attracted to all kinds of yogas. Oh, that Mahatma, he had this wonderful experience. That's not our path. Even Sri Ramakrishna's path, Sri Aurobindo, in very beginning chapters of the synthesis of yoga, he says you cannot take the kingdom of heaven by storm, by violence. If you do that, you have not fulfilled the purpose for which ignorance was created. We are basically making a fool of God when we say that, well, ignorance was created, now you come back. There is a purpose why it was created. It was created so that the souls can go from form to form. That is the journey of rebirth. And through varied experiences, slowly the soul grows. It starts drawing nearer to God. How does it draw nearer? There is a conception of ideal, then it wants something more perfect, beauty, truth, good, etc. I'm already much developed. Initially, it's asana mrityu, completely in ignorance. There is no awakening even that there is a soul. It's a just sleeping baby in the cradle. So it's rocked. That cradle rocks very violently because the baby has to wake up. At some point, it wakes up. And then the journey begins, another level of journey, where it starts saying, who am I, why am I, where am I, why am I, what is all this game going on? Then slowly it starts getting attracted towards a greater ideal, truth, love, good, beauty. Wisdom attracts through the luminous masks. Sri Aurobindo says our ignorance is a chrysalis of truth. Then a time comes when, through all this, the soul is developing into discovering that it is none else but Sohamasmi. It stands on the gates of the sun and says, that Purusha there and this here are one. He am I, Sohamasmi. Before that, it must meet a master, true master, who can tell Tattvamasi. You are that. Not like you are, caught up here and go there. Not like that. So when the soul through this long journey realizes it, then it is able to bear the matter in which it inhabits, can bear the impact of this tremendous experience. We cannot imagine what it means to experience omnipotence and omniscience in a body. Sri Aurobindo uses the word, what will supramental creation will be? He says it is practical omniscience and practical omnipotence. What you want to know, you will know. What you want to, you need to, whatever you will be there. Omnipotence. But of course, this will be one with knowledge. So there are, between the human mind as it stands today in its seeking towards knowledge and the one, there are further steps of ascension where we can say that the fundamental ignorance is no more there. What it is meant by that now we know that, well, there is a goal of the journey. We know that this creation is emerged from the divine. This is not just an intellectual knowledge, but something like an intuitive sense within the heart. Intellectual knowledge is a concept. It's not a concept. There is this intuitive sense ki one way or the other it can come. It doesn't come in sentences, but it can take the form of speech. That all is an expression of the one. Sab mein Bhagwan hai. When we say it deep within the intuitive sense. So it starts from that, and then as it ascends, fundamental ignorance is gone. We begin to become aware of our soul. Why? Because now the covering layers have become very thin. Yet we must come back and continue in the body. There is a point beyond which we need not come back. But the great souls, the heroic souls, the Ishwar Koti come back. They say, no, the work is unfinished. So they take again a form, a human form. But because these souls have developed, the form also corresponding, because see, nature is also advancing. It says, okay, now this fellow wants to come back. Imagine a Vivekananda wants to come back. So it says, I have to build a form which is appropriate. Now imagine when someone ascends to these great levels. But it will be within a limit because nature has to build from within that elements. So it builds a form which can take it to so many steps further. And yet, when the soul comes back, it starts making this form more and more luminous. So generally, it's very interesting. We can understand why the Divine Mother, when she gave this experience of the new substance, fusing with the substance which so far nature has created. Nature has created using the substance, has created such forms which can bear to an extent the impact of the greater consciousness, to an extent. But it cannot keep it for long. That's why you see great yogis have to go into that trance. They withdraw into states of meditation, experience that consciousness, then they come back. But you see something unique about Mother and Sri Aurobindo. They could stay in the body in the waking consciousness, experience that supreme consciousness in all its levels. This is the purpose. So there is no opposition, and that's where comes the knowledge of the many. See, it's very interesting. When we touch that one consciousness through this long process, then we start seeing it, because we have not skipped the steps and stages. Then we start seeing how it is operating at different levels in different human beings in different activities. So when, for me it was an eye-opener, because when I read Sri Aurobindo's The Mother, very interestingly found it on a Calcutta bookstall, Havra bookstall, where I went to look for something of the Mother, and it was Sri Ramakrishna bookstall. So I don't know how, the only book which was available was The Mother. They thought The Mother means Mother Sarada. But they just handed over this small, we have only this book. I didn't understand what it means. It's going to be another life-changing experience. I picked up. I said, very good. And as I sat in the train over the next 4 hours, I knew whom Sri Aurobindo is speaking about. The end of the journey, or rather the beginning of a new journey. So when we look at this fusion of this new substance, when we read this book, The Mother, we see something very interesting. I'm sure people must have observed it. See, in tradition, we have Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Kali. Who is Saraswati? She is the goddess of learning. But Sri Aurobindo, same knowledge. You see, there are two goddesses. One is Maheshwari, and then there is Saraswati. So Maheshwari lays down the large lines of knowledge. Along this line, along that line, along that line. Saraswati enters into the details of this knowledge. Saraswati is also a goddess of knowledge, but detailed knowledge. That's why she builds perfection. So we have knowledge operating at two levels. One is where there is the fundamental knowledge of the one, and looking at world from that poise, that grand poise, tranquil, calm. She is above all this. And from there we look at the world. This one kind of knowledge of the one. But another poise of knowledge is because all these world processes also carry, the one has flown into it in all the flux. Because it's the origin. Origin cannot say, okay, I'll stay there. Things will collapse. So the origin has flowed into this creation. Outside is ignorance, multiplicity, behind is one. In everything aspect of creation we can see it. Look at matter, outside, amazing differentiation. Go to the roots, so many elements. Go still further, atoms. Go still further. Atoms are differentiated by, play of electron, proton, neutron. Ultimately, electrical charges. Go back. So one discovered that there is one behind, but there are many outside. Go to the level, this material creation, go to the level of life. All life ultimately is characterized by certain fundamental principles. It's the same. It's all built on the RNA block. Just imagine, from the virus. And what RNA is built up of? Amino acid and some little structure. It is all, the entire right up to man is the same. And sometimes so amazing. Can we imagine that if you look at the genome structure of the yeast, what is it? Fungus, no? Very useful fungus. So yeast and human beings is 98% same. Just by the play of variation nature has created. One is a fungus which is useful, another is a would-be fungus. But would-be God. That's the beauty of man. He may choose that line, but still, if he is like yeast, it is all right. He becomes a leaven for something greater. That's what man is meant to be. So look at, life. Look at mind. Okay, life operations, mind. Mind operates by thought. Thought operates by words. Words operate by sounds. You can go back to fundamental sounds. Lights, plenty of lights. But you can go back to the one white light. Sounds, multiple vibration. Go back to one Nadashwar. Everywhere we see unity and multiplicity together. Multiplicity has its roots in unity. That's where we see the image of the Ashwath tree. Urdharva, it is upstairs. From there it's branching out. So, this knowledge of the one and the knowledge of the many, they are not two different things. But truly to understand the many, we must first know the one. That's why the Upanishad is right when it says, Kena Upanishad, Yan mansana manute yenahur manomatang tadeva brahman tam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. Avigyatam vijnanata. You cannot know it by mind. Find it first. It's right. But the path is not trenchantly cutting it. Path is what Isha Upanishad says. Vidyancha vidya. Even Ken Upanishad says that. First, from this limited way of understanding life, enter into the domain of the gods. And be a god. One of the gods. Gods means highest qualities. Try to embody the highest that human beings can embody. And then be as a god. Still, gods don't know the one. That's what Ken Upanishad says. So go to the next level where you discover the unknowable. Who will create something still greater than the world of the gods that they have created. So these are the steps, and the Isha Upanishad puts it more directly. Vidyancha vidyancha yastadvedo bhyam saha. Be rooted in Vidya. That's important. Understand Avidya from that principle. Know the one and then understand the many. It doesn't mean, see, this idea that all is one, all is same. This is a most, it's a worse distortion probably than simply saying all are different. That is a kind of distortion. But to say all is same is a worse distortion. Actually, Upanishad is absolutely right when it says a greater darkness. See what happens when we say all is one. We used to say it. We forgot that it is not an intellectual concept. The one and the many coexist, and we have to understand the differentiation in nature as much as you have to understand the one. So what happened when we said no, all is one? One Brahman, ekame vidyutyam, sarv khalvidam Brahman, and we got it intellectually, not in realization. So when Greek invaders came, we said, please welcome your God coming to our doorsteps. Fortunately, God also took the form of Chandragupta and Chanakya and drove them away. But we didn't learn the lesson. All this is Maya, only the one. So then God came as Mughal invaders and the Portuguese and the Britishers. And he said, please welcome, we are all one. Our Guru has taught us great knowledge. All is one. And because these people didn't know, nobody was there to tell them. Sri Aurobindo was yet to come on the scene. That see, all is one, but he plays with many. Vidyancha vidyancha yastadvedo bhyamsa. See, this teaching of the Isha Upanishad, which puts it so beautifully, was almost blotted out. Why? Because it had to be also given an Mayavadi illusionistic twist. But when we understand this way, then we understand that ignorance and knowledge are two terms of one consciousness. Child will grow into adult. He should not say, now I have forgotten. He must understand that these are the steps. So when he has children, he takes them through these steps. See how the mother deals with us so beautifully. When we look at mother's conversation, it's the most perfect example I have ever found of vidyancha yastadveda bhyamsa. You go to a traditional Guruji, he will tell you about, you should have good thoughts, nice, kind deeds and all that, and see God. Cool. What happens about this creation? You ask the mother, how to sleep. She will teach you how to sleep. She'll connect that sleep to the one. When in deep sleep, ultimately you touch that one. You ask the Divine Mother, how to eat. So she will teach us how to eat and ultimately connect that the body should form elements so that it can be helpful in the sadhana when you are finding the one. Teach her about relationship. Mother, how to love. Okay? Love in this way so that ultimately the energy of love in you, which is seeking for joy outside, begins to turn within and in the person discovers the one. Okay? Mother, how to know? Again, pick up any object, anything in this world. Go to its core, you will discover the one. That's what Ken Upanishad ultimately says. A grain of, even a blade of grass contains within itself the one. That's what the, out of the full came the full, and in each element the full is there. And even if you subtract it, Purnameva Vasishyate, it still remains full. So, ignorance is on the surface, avidya. In the depth is knowledge. Ignorance and knowledge are not two cut off truths, it's one reality expressing in two ways. The first step in our journey is ignorance, and through many steps of the unfolding of knowledge through the terms of ignorance, we arrive at the one. And when we arrive thus at the one and look down, we see that it's one single beautiful reality. See, in the Vedas, this opposition was not there. In the Vedas, this opposition was exactly like this story, that there is the truth and it begins to express itself. Things are ordered in the right way. Slowly, slowly, as it goes toward the inconscious, that truth is covered. So the word used was Rit and Anrit. That's how we see Satyamev Jayate, Nanritam. So there is the truth which is behind everything. A truth occult has made this world. But it is covered by the night. So by removing the night, you find the day. Later on, it became a trenchant opposition. It was no more like remove the avidya and you will find vidya. Come out of the zone of avidya. So when you remove the night, there is a process of doing it. And when we do it, night becomes progressively thinner and thinner, and then one discovers the one. So this is beautifully expressed in Shobindo's Savitri. Several places he has written it. There's a whole chapter in the Life Divine on knowledge and ignorance, where he brings out these things very beautifully. In several places, Isha Upanishad, Ken Upanishad, even some of his essays. But my favorite, Savitri. There are two, even before that we can read. There is only one. So, for the sake of becoming many, he becomes two. Knowledge and ignorance are two terms. When his power, Vidyamai Maya, is fully conscious of the Lord, his Maya, then it is still one. When it is knowledge, when it becomes as if forgetful of the Lord, because it has to build those extreme forms in which it must go and almost entrap itself. Why? Again, because these forms by development will be able to embody. Otherwise, you cannot. If directly build certain forms which are too subtle, they will just collapse back into the one. They won't be able to sustain that tremendous energy. So the long journey, which if we understand the process, is worth it. Our souls enjoy it because we knew it and we plunged into it. But when the ego looks at it, it says, oh my God, ये क्या इतना complex भगवान ने बना दिया, अविद्या बना दी, विद्या बना दिया, knowledge, ignorance, why all this tamasha? Because our ego finds it very disconcerting. Because our normal experience of life is manyhood. And then we are told go to one. But then we are told no, from the one you act upon the many. It says, my God, this is tremendous. But our souls know it. So the stress is on discovering the soul, but not to leave creation. While in the body, continue to expand the consciousness. And as this, the soul grows towards its own universality and transcendence, matter begins to slowly get impacted and change. Even a little dent is enough. That's how it is described. The mother speaks about it. Now you see, before we read this, something very interesting. So what is this knowledge which scientists have? Knowledge of the scientist and knowledge of the yogi. Can a yogi who lives in a state of knowledge, one, because the one can understand the many ultimately, can he know about everything? Technically, yes, but how he will know? So, ordinarily, our means of knowledge, which is an ignorance, are indirect. Meaning, thereby we know something first through the senses. I grasp a form, I apprehend. That's how I come in contact with. Then that object is picked up by the mind. And the mind runs over it. It's like does a quick data processing. Compare, contrast on the surface. Then finally, this matching or near matching. And it says, this is what it is. It gives us the sense. Is it really the complete knowledge? Anyone with basic understanding will say no. How can I know? The only way I can know is by becoming one with that person. How do I know that I am hungry? Because I am one with my hunger. How do I know that I am in love? Somebody else cannot tell me whether I am in love or not. I will know it because within I experience that love. There is no chemical test which can tell me that. How can somebody tell me that I am in joy? Well, it may express itself outwardly, it may not. By identity, we can know, and that is the beauty of the one. That the one consciousness being the source of everything, when we unite with the one, this new possibility opens that through the form we can pass into that one and know things from within outwards. Yogis can know it. But when they know it thus, our so called system of knowledge may be completely collapsed. Because we have built a very indirect understanding based on which we have built structures. But from within you seek it is not true at all. Look at how things change. Even science it advances like that. So at one place the mother says there are no diseases. So you wonder, what is she saying? She says there are formations. There is something like that. There are states of imbalance. There is disharmony. Because from within you see it like that the vibrations are ticking like this. And then your means of changing, working upon life also change. So when someone went to Sri Aurobindo with pain in the right iliac fossa, medically it's an appendicitis. Oh, I've got a severe pain. Sri Aurobindo looks at him. And the mother sees that, two subtle arms, one subtle arm goes and picks up a little dancing spot, black dancing spot, throws it far and says, my pain is gone, my pain is gone. Why? Because now you don't know it, see it as appendicitis. That's the doctor's way of looking at it. And it is valid within his own limited way. You can't transpose this knowledge onto a doctor and say, act upon that, because he'll be lost. Poor doctor, he will say, what are you saying, sir? So from the point of view of scientist, this knowledge of the one may sound like ignorance. See, it's very interesting. It may sound like an illusion. Oh, they are living in some illusion. But this knowledge is one with power. All knowledge is one with power, however limited it may be. Knowledge empowers us. This we must know. But from this point of view, this whole thing looks like a construction. The mother said illnesses are falsehood of the body. You go to a hospital and you catch because there are formations around. And doctors have concretized it by giving names, labeling it. So this is another kind of knowledge, seeing things from within outward. But at the same time, she says, well, they can't help it. Poor doctors, they are not yogis. But ideally, a doctor should be a yogi to understand things from within outward. Even a teacher should be a yogi. A sitar player should be a yogi. A person who does gymnastics should be a yogi. Because then you have the correct understanding of everything from the true perspective. So it is true that the yogin can know, he can even know about the so-called constructions of the mind through a different process. Not through the direct vision, because direct vision one can see that it is a range of falsehood. But what he can do is, he can enter into, there is a whole Earth's memory where all these things, that all the discoveries, the books, the libraries, the inventions, everything is there. So by trying to look at it, he comes into contact and knows it. But ordinarily, the two operations are very different. When we are operating from ignorance and trying to get knowledge, the typical example is, in fact, Mother gives this example in one of her conversations, but actually it happened when Golconda was being built. They were trying to know where to have the water divining process, and they were trying the mathematical calculation. So they went to the mother and asked her. Someone suggested, and this engineer said, what will mother know about all this? And she looks at it and says, here. Then they wonder that, yes, actually, why didn't we think of it? So you see, this knowledge tries to laboriously find. It may find, it may not find. But there is another kind of knowledge where you know it by a direct identity, by a kind of intuitive sense. Some scientists may reach these higher regions. That is still not the knowledge of the one. But they may reach higher regions, higher mind, maybe some a little beyond. And suddenly this knowledge can pour into their head. They pass beyond the rational mind. So there is a whole, range from the human mind to the one. But Still, that is not yogic knowledge, but they do experience higher states of consciousness. How Valmiki experienced the first verse of Ramayana. It is said that it is the first sloka ever written. I don't know. But suddenly he saw a scene happening before him and he came out with the sloka and he says, "What have I spoken?" He asked his disciples, "Did you get it, hear it right?" Bharadwajan, he is at loss. What should he say? So how it happened? That's how the first sloka was born. It is said. So this knowledge of the one also implies in this highest sense that one will know the many in a correct way. That knowledge may or may not be ratified by the immediate scientist. Yet, if the scientist goes further and further in his seeking for truth, he will start coming closer to it. So today we see those things already, sometime we are digging deeper and deeper, and a time will come and we'll say illness is a vibratory mode. Correct this vibration by bringing in, that's how mantras may heal. We don't know, music may heal. Because you're setting right a vibratory mode. So this knowledge is not just one day I get up and say, I know God is there. It has tremendous impact upon life. So this tendency to cut this knowledge, vidya, from everything else is wrong. In Vedantic method of teaching, everything was connected to everything else. So the one, from there we see dance, music, poetry, science, everything was connected to the one. This is how we have to look at it from the other way around, rather than ignorance climbing towards knowledge. Arrive at that state of knowledge by expanding ignorance, but seeking that one. And then from there to start understanding the entire working of the cosmos. So these are the lines. The master of being has come down to her. He is the maker and the world he made. He is the vision and he is the seer. So when forms were being made from the one existent, she drew out Maya and started building forms. And Maya itself has come from, is his Maya, the Lord's Maya. He is the vision and he is the seer. He is himself the actor and the act. He is himself the knower and the known. So that's how knowledge operates. There is the knower, there is the known, and there is a process of knowledge. But when you arrive at identity, then the knower and the known are one. You don't need a process because they are one. That's how we see in Savitri book 15. There the knower is one with the known. There the lover is one with the loved. Because there is a complete identity. He is himself the knower and the known. He is himself the dreamer and the dream. There are two who are one and play in many worlds. In knowledge and ignorance, they have spoken and met. Even in ignorance, one is behind. In knowledge, one is in the revealed. That's the only difference. But he's always there. That's why there is possibility of evolution, growth, progress. If they were cut off, there would be no hope. And light and darkness are their eyes interchange. Pleasure and pain are their wrestle and embrace. So he has deliberately veiled himself. That's what ignorance is about. Our deeds, our hopes are intimate to their tale. They are married secretly in our thought and life. Even our worst thoughts, seemingly, are known to the one. Because there is no such disconnect. From the point of view of one. From this side, there is a disconnect. That's why when mother would look into the eyes, she would know. She would say some places there are a lot of resistance. There is like a iron, this thing. See, it has practical implication. Don't hide anything from the divine because nothing is really hidden from him. So when people would come and say, Mother, you know everything, why should we say? She said, because you will become conscious. That's all. Nothing is really hidden. Our deeds, our hopes are intimate to their tale. They are married secretly in our thought and life. The universe is an endless masquerade. For nothing here is utterly what it seems. To the scientist, he knows the seemings. Oh, this is a virus and this is a vaccine. Ask the yogi. Yogi, again, there are yogis and yogis. One who has arrived at one, you will see it's a vibratory mode. That's it. How to help it? Set the vibration right. How to do it? Stay quiet, call the grace, it will set it right. Apply the principle of harmony. As simple as that. Such direct action. But seeming is this. It's a virus, it's a vaccine, it's a mask, it's all these things. For nothing here is utterly what it seems. It is a dream fact vision of a truth. So it is not illusion in the sense that it's non-existent. This is another meaning people give to avidya. It is only illusion in the sense it's a distortion of a reality, or it's a diminution of a reality. But why the diminution becomes a distortion? Because we see it cut off from all the rest, so it becomes a distortion. So any event, any circumstance, you see it disconnected with all the rest, then it looks like hanging in and the whole world appears a meaningless tale. But when you look at it from the continuum, then you see it as its right place. So that's how it is distorted. Which, but for the dream, would not be wholly true. So this distortion is to be set right by a constant application of knowledge. When the forms are ready to manifest knowledge, true knowledge, I mean knowledge in the sense of the one and the many, then we will see slowly that because of this action, this world will wake up to a greater. More and more men would turn toward the light. The frontiers of the ignorance shall recede. See how Sri Aurobindo describes the supramental world. Not that suddenly there will be, Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. The frontiers of the ignorance shall recede. And we see this happening today in the world. If phenomena stands out significant against dim backgrounds of eternity, we accept its face and pass by all it means. A part is seen, we take it for the whole. This is ignorance. Thus they have made their play with us for roles, author and actor with himself as seen. He moves there as the soul, as nature, she. Here on the earth where we must fill our parts, we know not how shall run the drama's course. Our uttered sentences veil in their thought. Her mighty plans she holds back from her sight. She has concealed her glory and her bliss and disguised the love and wisdom in her heart of all the marvel and beauty that are hers. See, she has become ignorance. Aditi has become this. She has become for a particular purpose. Only a darkened little we can feel. He too wears a diminished godhead here. He too has come as Chinna souls. Okay, that's what we are talking about. He has forsaken his omnipotence. His calm he has forgone and infinity. Why? Because he must recover it on the basis of the form. If he recovers this prematurely and says, okay, I am that, then the whole purpose of play is gone. He knows her only, he has forgotten himself. To her he abandons all to make her great. The forms and everything by nature, that has to be upgraded. He hopes in her to find himself anew, incarnate, wedding his infinity's peace. To her, creative passions, ecstasy. Thank you.